Well, good afternoon. I guess this is lunchtime, and thank you, Jim. And I'd like to thank the Heartland Institution for having me, and my friend Kevin for mentioning it to me. I want to first talk about where the book came from and the idea of why I ended up writing the book, and go through what the point of it is and what I'm trying to achieve, and then obviously I'll take any questions and discuss further. So the book was not nothing. I didn't get an epiphany, or I didn't sit down and say, I want to write a book. What's my topic going to be? And I started doing research. What happened was, I guess, in the 2008 presidential election, politics tends to, from a presidential election standpoint, come out more, and people tend to talk about it more at home and with friends than they do in off years. So I remember listening to people talk and watching the news and hearing comments between McCain and Obama. And McCain would make an argument about one of Obama's, policy views or something. And I would hear these angry responses. And I thought that was kind of odd, but you generally just kind of ignore it and not say anything. So that went on throughout the process of that election. Obama wins. Everyone's excited. We go back to normal. And then you hear all the anger when different people attack the president. And then the same thing happened again when Romney ran. So I started to wonder why all of a sudden, one, as far as most of us who pay attention know, whether it's right or wrong, Democrats tend to attack the president when he's a Republican, and it goes the other way when the president's a Democrat. But now, when you disagree with the president, you're a racist. And I wondered why, and I would ask my friends and say, if McCain makes a comment or Romney makes a comment during an election, and you disagree with him, why can't he just be wrong as opposed to being a racist? Why can't you just say, that guy made a point, it's a crazy point, and I don't agree with him? And their responses to me was that they have to be racist because all Republicans are racist. So logically, none of this made sense to me, so I knew that they weren't using logic to come up with their responses or their beliefs. So it made me question, well, why do we vote primarily as blacks the way we do? Because a lot of people don't base things on logic or why they vote the way they vote. But I realized that the discrepancy was so much larger. There was such a dichotomy with the black community as compared to other communities. So women may tend to vote for Democrats more a little bit, Hispanics, Jews, everyone has that group that's a little bit one way or the other, but nobody was 95-5 but us. So I'm like, okay, why is that? And what I found was, for most people I talk to, they say that, well, my parents or my family always voted Democrat, so I just did. I never really paid attention. Or I was told this about the Republicans. So it led me to question both why they did it that way and why the Republicans, after years of this, haven't done anything to change it. And Joseph made some good points about the outreach thing, and that's interesting because it's not that it's not necessary, but the way the Republicans tend to do it is, counterproductive. It almost may be better not to do it at all. Because if you show up in the black community every 4 years when there's a presidential election, you're going to look like an opportunist. Nobody's going to take you seriously. So I've always wondered why there aren't just an ongoing set of policies and events and things to do that you just do where you do in your neighborhood, you do it in other neighborhoods. So I've asked that question to some in the Republican Party and have not really gotten an answer, but that just seems to make sense. So when I wrote the book, it was more, okay, how can we get these two groups together? They used to be together, obviously, right? Blacks used to vote for Republicans, pretty much 95% of the time. So why was there a change, and what can you do, and why should they listen to each other? Do they need each other, which is where I lead to at the end. So in doing that research and putting the book together, I said, okay, what is different about my approach in the book than some of the other books out there that I see? And what I found was, I try to be open to everyone, even the people that I disagree with, because I figure I can learn something from everyone. But what I find from the books are, I love the titles like Liberalism is a Social Disorder, and Rush Limbaugh's a big fat idiot, and all that kind of stuff. So you're already losing the argument if you start off, if my goal, because my goal is a little different. If my goal is to get everyone to kind of just take away the labels, more of a libertarian, independent kind of approach. Even though I do say that I'm a conservative, you don't have to be, and I don't have to agree with you, but listen to what everybody has to say and make your own opinion. But most people won't listen based on the label. So since my goal is to get everyone to listen, I don't think it works if you're attacking people. So, that's the first thing that's different. I wasn't, calling out people or saying Democrats of this or saying Republicans of this. And I also wanted to eliminate that misconception that if you're black and you're a conservative, it's because you're wealthy and you made it and you went to an Ivy League school, and it's just because you don't care about the other black people who aren't in the position as you. So I start off the book talking about my background because I think it mirrors that of many black people in my age range. I grew up in an all-black community. I grew up in a family of Democrats. I grew up in a family where no one went to college. I went to college and dropped out initially. So I don't think that my background was any different from anyone else's. So so it took away that whole elitist table that, well, he's just one of them kind of deal. So once I kind of set that ground, the background for myself and where I came from and what I learned, I kind of went into how I started to follow politics and what I found, and started to kind of disprove a lot of misconceptions that I found. So I took everything that I heard, like, all Republicans are rich, right? Which we know all of them aren't rich, but some of them are, and they're successful business people. But they don't realize that the wealthiest people in Congress are Democrats. They don't realize that. Speaking of realize, the other thing I noticed is, this is what really shocked me. I was speaking to so I'm 43. I'll be 43 years old this year, and I was speaking to friends who were between 38 and 50, who openly told me, because I didn't think it was odd, that I never followed politics until Barack Obama won, which you can take that however you want to take it. But what I found interesting from it was the fact that they say that, but if I talk to them today, we will have a debate, and they will debate me like they're political scholars. So now everybody, that's part of the reason why you can't win the debate, because everyone became an overnight expert when he became president. So they have nothing to compare it to, and they don't have any, previous information or education in politics. But you can't teach, so you may be armed with the information, but how are you going to give them that information? Are you going to go to them and say, listen, stupid, let me tell you how this really is. You're a Democrat and you're not that bright, so let me explain it to you, right? They're not going to listen to you, right? So when I watch the news and I hear the way a lot of information is being disseminated from conservatives and Republicans on TV, I just roll my eyes and I say, you can't believe that method of giving information is going to work. So you have to kind of put some sugar in the medicine, so to speak. So I was telling Jim that and Joseph that most of the events I get invited to speak, I fortunately get a chance to speak to a lot of people, but unfortunately they all tend to be in the suburb. And so I know that there are conservatives in the city, but everything seems to be, it's like they're so strong and they're so galvanized and they're rah-rah in the suburbs, and then in the city it's nothing. I went to an event and I got into kind of a debate with the gubernatorial candidates and with Dan Proft. So I asked him a question. I said, okay, everything sounds great, but here's my question. If Bill Brady's a great example. Bill Brady lost the governor's seat, and he won 99 counties out of 102. I think Chicago matters. I think Cook County matters. So if you put all your efforts into people that are more willing to listen to you, and you don't want to put in the work to speak to the people who are less likely to listen to you, you're destined to fail. So then I get in the book about why blacks need the Republican Party and why Republicans need blacks. So from that standpoint, I say, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. I have my own opinion. But if you think that everyone should listen to both parties, and you think that you may be a conservative, you think that they have slightly better ideas, you won't get them on a national level if Republicans continue to write off Atlanta and Chicago and New York and LA and think they're going to win national elections. So it doesn't work for them, especially since, minority groups tend to vote more Democrat, and they tend to grow, they seem to be growing at a faster rate. So that doesn't work for them. And for blacks, I just simply ask a simple question. I say, you've been voting Democrat either because someone else told you to, or because you think their policies may be better for you as black people. Because a lot of people, I get into how a lot of the views and issues that people talk about, and they don't base them on logic, but they don't really base them on race. They're basing it on selfishness. We're all selfish. We want what is going to be best for me, what is in my best interest, which it could have been worded better, but which is why Mitt Romney got in trouble when he said that 47% of the people just weren't going to vote for him anyway. They already wrote him off, and he wasn't going to try to get their vote. It wasn't that he was saying, I don't want those black people to vote for me. He's just saying it's in their best interest to continue to get the benefits that they're getting, so they're going to vote for the person to give them the benefits, right? Well, that self-interest goes both ways, but I just say to the black people at the end of that, I say, but what if you're wrong? What if you vote for Democrats and you think their policies are better and they don't work? Then what happens, right? You've already written off the other half of the population because you won't even listen to what the Republicans have to say. That's a problem. But then the other thing is that Republicans, how do I put that? Okay, I'll say that if they're a large portion, if not half of the population, and you're writing them off and you're not listening to their issues. You think they're wrong. But then the Democrats, who used to come into your neighborhood and ask for your vote and see what you needed to get their vote, but now they know that they're going to get your vote anyway. So now, if you have a Democrat in a close race and they need to get every vote, squeeze every vote they can out of it, they go to a women's group and they say, okay, what do you need for me to get my vote? And they go to Jews and say, what do you need to get my vote? And they go to Hispanics and they say, what do you need to get my vote? But they don't go to the black community because you can't really get much more than the 95 or 96 they're getting. So you have no leverage at that point. So for one thing, I say, even if you don't agree with the Republicans Party, maybe you need to just lie to them and use that as leverage and tell the Democrats, I'm going to vote for the Republicans if you don't give me something, start showing me something. Because if we talk about the civil rights movement in that early 60s time, when the shift started to happen after Barry Goldwater, we're talking 50 years. So for 50 years, really we can go all the way back to FDR, because Republicans still got 25 to 30% of the vote, but it was majority Democrat at that time. So 80 years. So you have to just take the emotion out, put the information in, get the results, and say in 80 years, of voting primarily for Democrats, what has the black community gotten? And ask that question and then act accordingly. But that's not what they do. So the question becomes, has it been beneficial only voting for one party? We have a two-party system. From a black community standpoint, whites have a choice. There are a lot of white liberals. There are a lot of white conservatives. But the difference is they have a choice. They made a conscious decision that based on my beliefs, this is the party I'm going to align myself with, and these are the people I'm going to vote for. But we don't have that option. It becomes, if you're black, you vote for Democrats, and that's what you do. Excuse me. And so the other reason is just beyond whether you agree with the issues or not, and listening to both parties, is that you should consider the Republican Party because you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So the book was not intended to tell people Republicans are right and vote for Republicans. When reading it, you'll find that I don't get into many issues because I wanted the focus to be on why we think a certain way and why we vote a certain way and how that mindset needs to change and why. So if I got into my beliefs on every issue, people would say either get turned off because they disagree with me and close the book, or they want to, you meet me and you say, I want to talk to you about your views on abortion. I want to talk to you about your views on, gay rights or whatever, which is not the point of the book. The point of the book is, why do you vote this way? Because, when I talk about the misconceptions, I say, I mentioned Rich, and then another one is that all conservatives are right-wing zealots, which is not true, but what is a right-wing zealot? Is it because you're a Christian, you believe in God, or because you're crazy? Most of them is like, if you quote the Bible and you believe in God, then you're a right-wing zealot. Wouldn't that make most black people a right-wing zealot? Yeah. So that's not the reason why, right? So I also feel this with a lot of, data and stats. So it says, okay, what percentage of blacks go to church compared to whites, compared to Democrats, compared to conservatives, that kind of thing. And the information's there, so they can argue with me. So when you talk to that person who just started following politics this morning, and they say, but I know all this, say, okay, did you know this? Well, I don't believe that. Okay, you're wrong. Okay, check this out. Go to the site, read it. it came from a government site, not from a conservative site, that kind of deal. So we got those two misconceptions. Then there's, war. We always talk about how conservatives love war and they want to go to war, and Bush was a warmonger and everybody wants to do this. But I went back in history and looked at all the wars and who was president and how we got into the wars, and it turned out that it wasn't mostly Republicans. It's about equal if you want to count the Civil War, but since most people say that was good, you throw that one out, him being a Republican, not a Democrat. Right? So everything's not, it's not so cut and dry. So I just wanted to have people say, okay, just open your mind and listen to them. And if you listen to them and you disagree with them, then vote for Democrats. I'm not here to make you a Republican because, I can't say I agree with everything they say, just like any other party. But if you ask them, would they really say that they disagree? That they agree with everything Democrats say? No one. What politicians has ever run? He's like, that guy's perfect. He's done nothing wrong, and I agree with everything that he says. It doesn't happen. So yeah, what I found in the research, which was interesting though, is I found a lot of people. Now this I still don't understand. Maybe you all can help me out with this one, but I found a lot of people who call themselves one-issue voters. So, I got that one thing, that's what I vote on. If you agree with me on that, I'll vote for you. So who cares what you do with the economy? Who cares what you do with, anything else? As long as you're on my side on abortion or gay rights or whatever that thing is, you're my guy. It's when you say it out loud, it's so obvious how that can be problematic, but I know that people do that. But there's another problem in that, because even though we make assumptions and you say, on average, Republicans are like this and Democrats are like this. But from a candidate standpoint, nobody agrees on every issue. So you can't just say, I'm going to vote for Democrats because more of them tend to agree with my one issue, because there are Republicans that may agree with that issue, with you on that issue, but have better ideas on all the other things that you don't really care that much about. Because every Republican isn't against gay marriage, right? But they assume that they all are. It's like, you're Republican, so that means this. So I talked to some of my, a couple of my friends. I have one that we debate a lot about politics, and he says to me, well, you know what, I've been listening to you, I read your book, and everything you say makes perfect sense. But your only problem is that that's you, and you're logical, but all the other Republicans are crazy. So if they thought like you, you're nodding your head in the back, if they thought like you, then I could probably consider Republicans, but they're not like you. And I said, well, why do you say that? How can they all be like, so now I got them engaged, so I'm happy. Okay, why do you say that? And he says, well, okay, I'll give you an example. The other day, Republican, your guy from Iowa, some small town that was established 4 months ago, but he's my guy, was on TV, not even on TV, he was at a restaurant and they got a clip of him saying this and they played it, and that's your guy. And now, what do you think about that? And he's got me. And I was like, I think it's crazy. See, I agree with you. However, I don't even know who that politician is, and I don't live in that state. So how does that person speak for me? But okay, let's follow your logic. How about the woman on the South Side, the Democrat politician, who said that all the shootings in Chicago is bad? We have to admit that, but has anybody considered that maybe the cops are doing all these shootings? And he rolled his eyes like, somebody said this? Yeah. I said, that's crazy. So what do you think about that? He said, I think that's crazy. So if she speaks for you, that's your girl? It's like, no, I didn't even know she said it. Exactly. So here's the problem. It's not that, Republicans don't have any crazy people in the party. Of course they do. And so the Democrats. It's just that because the Democrats control the media, our crazies get on TV and theirs don't. That's it. That's the difference. So whenever somebody says some crazy statement and he's a Republican, it's going to be in the news for 3 days. So that's what people hear. So to that, I just say, and that it's like Joseph mentioned, it's a constant, getting out there, communicating. His lead-in was perfect. He talked about how he went from, I think it was 7 or 8 tables of blacks at the fundraisers to 2 or 3. I go to, when I speak at these places in the suburbs, obviously it's a lot of, some of them are Tea Party events, so, and all of them are racist. So I'm speaking to the room full of racists, right? And so the racists say to me, it's a fact, right there. Tea Party equals race. So I'm speaking to all the racists. And so one of the racists said to me, so how do we talk to what do we say to the black community? Like, I work with a girl who's always saying this and we debate this and I don't know what we'd say. But that's the problem. Black people aren't aliens. Why do you need to talk to them different? Talk to them the same way. Now, some of them are going to be crazy, just like the crazy people are. Then when you realize they're crazy, stop talking to them. But you still have to initiate the conversation and try to if they want to have the conversation about that topic, you can't be angry and you can't be, talk like, well, I don't agree with your views, so you're crazy. Just cut it off and say, okay, well, why do you think that? Because that's the reason I call the book Logic, because I like to let people come to their own conclusion as opposed to telling me, you're wrong, that won't work, and this is why. You give me an issue and I disagree with it, but what I will say is, oh, okay, so how would that work? And they explain to it, okay, so then what would happen after that? And then what would happen after that? And then what would? And then they say, oh, I guess that wouldn't work, would it? See, solve their own problem. I didn't have to say a word. But, and what I found have most fun with when I'm at the racist meetings is that, but it's a fact, right? That's what they tell me. But what's funny about it is, this is the other side, because I talk about why blacks need Republicans, and then I say why Republicans need blacks and this numbers and all that other stuff. But the other thing that's funny is that they're the opposite of the one issue. So we got a lot of my liberal friends are one issue voters, like gay marriage, and that's the only thing I care about. But there, it's like, I refuse to negotiate or compromise my beliefs. So which you shouldn't have to, but it's to the point that if that guy's a Republican, I agree with him on 8 of 10 things, but he's not, maybe you agree on 9 of 10 things, but you don't think he's as passionate about number 6 as you are, you're not going to vote for him. Now he's a rhino. So I'm like, you're not going to agree with everybody on everything, so let me, again, understand the logic here. So you agree with him on most things, but because he doesn't, approach it the way you want to approach it or speak the way you speak, you're going to beat him up. So we got this rhino thing out there. But we don't have a bunch of Democrats out there calling people Dinos, right? They have to disagree, right? Because people, if you ask us, everybody in this room something, we're not going to agree on everything. So we know they disagree, but they somehow don't disagree on TV. But a lot of them say, yeah, it's good to have hearty debate because it proves that we don't allow one member to stifle another, which is true, but you don't have to call people names. I mean, Ron Paul and who is he in the fight with, and Peter King don't need to have fisticuffs on TV in order to get their points across. But the other thing is when they talk about not compromising their beliefs, is that, so they agree with somebody about 8 or 10. One of the best ones, I was at the Arlington Heights Tea Party event. See, I changed the name that time. But you know what I'm talking about, the Tea Party event. And I talked about, well, I don't understand how, rhino or no rhino, I don't understand, whatever your beliefs are, how you're willing to do the country a disservice, in a sense, to kind of prove a point or something. They're like, what do you mean? So and somebody came up to me and still told me I was wrong, and I had lost that battle. But I said, so let me get this straight. Obama ran for president against either one of them, because they said the same thing about both. Most recently, let's pick Mitt Romney. So he ran against Romney. And you're a staunch conservative. So he won the nomination. You should have voted for somebody else. But he won the nomination. This is the general. You don't think he's right enough. So the way you're going to fix it is you're going to not vote and let Obama win. And that made sense to him. Oh, okay, so you got the guy who was more liberal to win just because you really didn't want Romney to win, and that made sense. It's like, well, and so one guy came up to me after the speech and said, well, I heard your analogy, and I get what you're saying, but it's like, as if you were drowning and you got 2 guys and one guy's holding you 10 feet underwater and one guy's holding you 5 feet underwater. Either way, you're going to drown, is what he told me. So I got a better chance at 5 feet than I do at 10. So that becomes a problem. So then we have that. We're already fighting against the people who won't listen. And we're fighting against the fact that the media won't put their crazies on TV, but they'll put our crazies on TV. But now, we have people in our own party that say, unless you're the right kind of right, or as right as I say you need to be, then you don't count and I'm going to write you off. But it's not right, which is probably the problem with, I'm going to generalize now with conservatives, is that they're more about being right and doing the right thing and not compromising, but sometimes it can be a challenge and hurt you in the sense that I look at it as if you're trying to win an election now. Policy is a different thing, but you're trying to win a general election for president. It's kind of like, a playoff game in the NFL, right? You may have played all season like this, but you look at your opponent and say, okay, now I got one opponent. For one game I need to win to go to the Super Bowl. So they're good. This is their strength, so I need to combat their strength. So I might need to change my strategy a little bit, you know. But they don't want to do that. So, because if you change the strategy, then the right wing of the party are going to say you're compromising. No, I'm winning the game, right? So which is what you have to do. So we have that problem where people want you to go out and say this, and we all may agree with it and it may make sense, but it just doesn't test well in the country, right? Now again, we're writing off LA and Chicago and Atlanta and New York, and then we lose again. So unless you're planning on, oh, we're all going to just run to the plain states, right? There's got to be a better approach in what we're doing. So at the end, the last chapter is where the party should go and what it should do. So I was a little, I think maybe some may say a bit self-aggrandizing, because I said they should buy the book and go on tour and just go out and say, okay, let's just have discussion. Republican Party, you know, all the different think tanks, just going into the community and say, okay, we're going to have a discussion we're going to have a Republican book club. And we're going to sit down, invite everybody, and we're just going to discuss, you know, those types of things and talk about, you know, why is it that you think that? Yeah, because you can't do it during an election year only, right? So just go in the community and have these conversations and just solicit conversations. And when you get beat down and put out and say, go away, just keep doing it as opposed to waiting to another election. Or talk about how they can do different events. Like, you know, I was telling Kevin about, you know, like Veterans Day. Like everybody, I was listening to 560 and Big John and Amy had a breakfast for the veterans, which was great. But of course it was in the suburbs because I guess there are no veterans in the city. So why not have, you know, all the groups have one, you know, like, you know, one big, you know, event that has 10 locations. So you do 4 or 5 in the suburbs and, you know, in the west suburbs, a couple in the south suburbs, and 3 in the city. Right, different things like that. You got to find a way to think differently about how you get your message out, which was my point. And I think that I guess the national, the RNC is supposedly trying to find a way to do outreach, but they're doing the same old kind of, you know, let's find a black person and send a black person to the black, because you can't do black because then you're the token. Right, for the black people, and that's what they're going to say when you send a black person. You can't send the white guy because they're not going to trust him. So it's got to be a mix. You need some old people and some young people and some white people and some black people, some people who live in the community, some conservatives, and then that's the other thing I say. Why do we write off the independent, the liberals and the independents? The guy is already on the fence. You know, instead of saying, get out of here, you're crazy, maybe you should be pulling them over the fence on your side, you know, as opposed to, you know, you got the rhino callers on one side and then you got the libertarians. Those are the whack jobs. We don't want the crazy people at our party, you know, so again, we're limiting. So now we're down to this small little bucket of people who sit in a room and, you know, agree and then go out and do nothing after that. So that in a nutshell, how am I? I'm good. Is what the book is about. You'll keep going, you say. You did kind of this, you go. Well, right on. Amen. And I may have missed a few humorous final points in the middle. I mean, I do go in a section where I, like I mentioned, talked about the differences between racism and, you know, just things that we call racism when it's really more like selfishness and defining what racism is, and because even that became a kind of a point of contention for some people. Everybody had a different definition for what it was. You know, some people like, if you don't like another person. Some people said, if you have power over this person. They added all these different, I mean, nobody goes to the dictionary anymore, I guess. But, you know, so it's just, you know, was meant to be kind of a tool for getting people who want to be active and interested in politics, or, you know, make their vote count, kind of use it as a way to say, okay, I'm going to use a logical approach, take out emotion, stop assuming that everybody in either party thinks a certain way, because from a racist standpoint, I always found it interesting that 100% of, I'm trying to remember the math because it's really hard, so 100% of the Republicans were racist, 60 to 70% of white people are racist, but half of the white people are Democrats, but none of the white Democrats are racist. Did I do that right? I might not have carried something else. But that didn't make sense to me, so I was like, okay, like, show me how that makes sense. I mean, just drawing a Venn diagram, it doesn't make sense. Forget about what you believe. Let's assume your numbers are right. Again, let you solve the problem for me. Solve that problem for me. Solve for X. And it can't be done. So that's the book in a nutshell. That's C. Douglas, Charles Douglas, where I got 18 different names. And I guess I'm open to Q&A. Your name tag's flipped, but yes.
Oh, okay. I must confess that I'm one of those conservatives who are very angry, and I sometimes call them rhinos, although I've been told not to call people rhinos anymore because there are no rhinos in the Republican Party.
No name called.
However, I do it on QT. I don't do it outwardly anymore. However, what happens when the party has changed so much? And we have Obama yesterday being able to threaten Republicans that if they didn't vote for the massive omnibus bill, whatever it's called, the bill that passed yesterday, they, of course, the government would close down. And they're so afraid of doing anything to be solid in the media that they are now for big government. They're for amnesty because Donahue of the Chamber of Commerce is pushing them. They're doing all those things to make them Democrat-light. So is this the way we want our party to go? And the Republicans are likewise, the Republican establishment members, we call them, are out to defeat all the conservatives so they can keep their positions, and this will make the party move more toward the establishment Republicans, which is no different because neither party wants to reduce spending or to have less government. And the Tea Party people are the only ones who are trying to take this country back to the Constitution and keep it from failing. And this is a big problem.
But I have two things. One,
yes.
It goes back to the selfish standpoint. So of course, the people who are in power, those even Republicans, they want to stay. They want to stay in their position, so they're going to do whatever they need to do and silence the other people. It's true, but that's those individuals, and you have to replace them. So
well, surely, but how can you replace them when those Republicans and the Chamber of Commerce is spending $50 million to defeat any conservative candidate who's going to try to come and approach McConnell from Kentucky and try to make sure that he wins the seat? And this is what they're doing.
That's a long fight. That's a lot. I mean, it makes sense, but it's not. You know, obviously none of this is an easy fix. But
no, the Tea Party people, and also what passed yesterday in the bill, is that they're going to the law. They have to keep in the law that has to do with Tea Party groups that they cannot. It's for the Tea Party groups that are going to make it very difficult for them now to even do anything at election time, like it was when the IRS walked away from them. So the Tea Parties are then. Also, but then, I'm sorry,
right. That's that. You started off with the unanswerable question, so we're going to end up coming back to you, I guess. Marianne, the light's glaring. Yes.
My question is this: I have friends who are black conservatives.
No, you don't. That's like having a unicorn.
I know them. I can give you their names.
All right. I might have to do some research, but go on.
And what they share with me is that they get a lot of resistance in their community. They're called all kinds of names for not towing the liberal progressive line, which is synonymous with the black power line.
Right.
So where is the leadership in the black community among pastors, among different community leaders to point out to their constituents that the Democratic Party has not served them well? And if you look at any large city, Detroit, Chicago, or any city across the country where Democrat government has been in effect, these places are all in ruins and going further.
Oh, that's definitely true. But you know, another two-part answer. One, they're there, but you have to understand that from a political standpoint. You know, it's kind of like a split. You talk about the clergy. Part of them, I mean, you turn people off if you're trying to, you're preaching your sermon and then you're pulling people aside in church and saying, this is, let's talk politics, right? That doesn't really work. But even if they are, the few that are willing to step out there and say, I'm so upset with this, I want to do something about it, they're more focused on the social issues, which just makes it even more difficult for the Republicans, because those are so they finally find some black people who are somewhat conservative, and all they're talking about is, abortion and gay marriage, because that's their thing, that's their strong belief, which is fine, but you don't have different colors of the black conservative within that community. So if you get them to go out and do that, then you're going to have some other approach in addition to that. And then you talk about the leaders, that's difficult to say because it all depends on everybody. I mean, just like who's a white leader? You don't have one person that you go to, right? That everybody. So it's the same thing. We're not all going to agree with whoever that person is. Because if you're wondering, our king is Jesse Jackson. He's our king. If you didn't know that, but we don't all agree with the king. So so it's like that. It's not really possible.
But my black conservative friends tell me that in the churches, when it comes around to time for voting, that people in the churches are actually told by their pastors who to vote for.
Right, and they shouldn't, but some of them are. That's the thing. But are there pastors? They're probably not black conservatives, right? They might, because there are a lot of people who are just like you can talk about the rhino. There are people who are conservative on social issues, but they vote Democrat all the time. So they're still going to tell you to go vote for Obama.
The kind of leadership, and I don't mean to monopolize this, but the kind of leadership I'm talking about is a true leader that can see where their constituents are being disserved by
Right.
social programs that encourage dependency and things that really keep them from achieving the American dream.
Well, the last thing I'll say is when I talked about growing up and us having similar kind of upbringing, and the people that I meet that are so on Obama's side, but you find out they haven't really started following politics until the last couple of years. Well, that doesn't eliminate those people as well. So a lot of those pastors are in that same boat, right? So they don't have that education at now. So they may think they may see because look at some of the liberals. It's not like they're stupid. It's not like they don't see that the issues have their difficulties. But we see it as a failure where they just see, well, it's just not implemented right, or it needs more money. So maybe that's how they see it. So it's kind of hard to say. Yes.
Just maybe some insight, maybe a response. In addition to a number of other things that I do, I have a ministry called Truth Exchange, and it's a community organization.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, when our state was debating SB 10, same-sex marriage bill, I chartered a bus to take people there, and of course, one of my first stops was to go to the various pastors in my surroundings, and although behind closed doors they agreed with me vehemently on everything, when I said, well, okay, well then on Sunday I'll come up and I'll just make this announcement. Nope. No, we don't want to do that.
Right.
Quoting, separation of church and state.
Right, exactly.
And they're very educated on the issue. Black people are not as liberal as the world would like to tell us that we are.
Mm-hmm.
So if we actually started using logic and kind of talk about things,
Right.
And begin to educate. So what I find firsthand is that people have been successfully threatened to not say any silence, have been successfully silenced,
Yeah,
and
that's
that
true.
there's a cost to say something.
Yeah.
And to your original point, your earlier point, it comes down to self-interest.
Right.
Am I willing to pay that cost,
Right.
which may mean fewer people or being ostracized or just called a bad name in this culture.
Right.
Being called a bad name is
really bad,
like,
right? Ooh.
like, oh my God, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that.
Yeah, that's true.
Primarily.
Right, that's true. So like that, it goes to what I said. So some of them, like you say, self-interest they're concerned about. Some of them may not agree with you. Some agree, but they're like, but even still, she's talking in general, but still you're talking, not only, but in that example, it was a social issue, right? So a lot of those pastors who feel so passionate about an issue that they want to talk about it, it's not going to be the economy, is my point.
But in the
Right.
black community, specifically speaking, the black pastor has always served as the leader.
Yep.
So if you're talking about leaders,
Yep.
the black pastor has always served as
Traditionally,
a leader
yep.
traditionally.
Mhm.
So if anyone would be able to talk about any of the issues and begin to educate, it would be the black pastor who has that, monopolized time to begin to present a message, whatever it may be.
Right.
But instead, they say nothing. As a result, black people get their information from reality television or what's called Al Sharpton, his, weird self, and all of that.
Yes.
I'm really glad you used the NFL analogy because I use it all the time too. There's a difference between making plays to move the chains and move down the field versus trying to throw a touchdown pass in every single play.
Right.
But you really hit the nail on the head in terms of the fact that over the last 50 years or 80 years, the Democrats have spent decades in these communities building relationships, building trust, and getting their message out there.
Right.
And that is really the fundamental problem that those right of center have in terms of trying to get our message out there. And I guess the million-dollar question is, what ideas or strategies do you have for those right of center to change that, to start building those relationships and maintaining a legitimate presence there instead of just sending a transplant there like 6 months before an election?
Right. Well, there needs to, one thing, and this tends to get me in trouble because there's so many of them out there. But one thing is, I don't think that they shouldn't exist, but they need to find a way to work together. So there are a lot of, like the Heartland Institute, you got the Heritage Foundation, the Illinois Policy Institute. You have all these groups, right? And they seem to be fractured, so they're all focused on whether it's just focused on economy, whether it's focused on black conservatism. It's all the little things they're focused on. So while I sit here and I say everybody's writing off the city, there's hope in the fact that there's all these groups out there, but how do we get them all to work together and not say, because I know some of these people and I contact them, and I was like, you're not big enough yet. When you get enough of a following, then you can talk to me. Why? You're writing off the city. Why can't we all just do an event in the city? Why can't we do something here or do an ongoing, once a month kind of thing? And I talk to some people who have great ideas, because I don't have all the ideas. I have a couple good ideas, and somebody will say something like, oh yeah, that's another good idea. But we're not harnessing these ideas because everybody has their own, it's one of the, so many pluses, it's one of the downside of communication moving so fast and the ease of doing things on the internet and blogs. Everybody can do their own. So why would I go with Diane and Kevin to do something when I can do something on my own? So now you have 400 little groups of 10 people, instead of a group of 4,000 people. So that's part of it. So there's ideas and things we can do, but are we going to just, work together, or is everybody going to, use their group to do their small piece, I guess is the thing. In the back.
Yes, so I work for a I take offense at the young lady's statement about Al Sharpton, because Al Sharpton is just as, if he is poisonous, he's just as poisonous as John Hannity, Garbo, and everyone, and all the other ones that are in the game for money.
Right.
Okay. Secondly, you have to look at the point of Jim Crow, and that's one thing that you didn't mention about after the ratification of the amendment in 1870, the effect of Jim Crow. Okay, and how Jim Crow took away so much that might have been given. The point during the amendment to the Constitution in 1870, it says the right of citizens of the United States to vote should not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state or on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The previous condition of servitude was slavery. That was the previous condition of a lot of people who was like me in the morning. Okay? So, you have to take into account the historical aspects of Jim Crow. During the 1920s, one of the reasons that so many African American people were labeled communists is because communist infiltrators in this country were telling African Americans, hey, they didn't give you your 40 acres of mule like they said they would. Why don't you come and be a communist? So what did they do? So they came down on W.B. Du Bois, and other people of Israel, Paul Robeson, and others of Israel who had done some great things. Dr. King himself was called a communist for some of the very same reasons. So my point being is that when you look at situations like this, as to white people vote, it's all about, they're looking at voting in terms of what is in their best interest. Okay, now, it could be, it could be that, for example, when Romney was on the scene, I thought he was an excellent candidate. But you can't go into a room of people who are going to give you $100,000 and say what you say and not expect it to resonate around the country.
Well, that's true,
You
but
can't say that.
let me go back to what you said before that, though. You said people vote in their best interest. And I disagree. I wish they did. They're not voting in their best interest. That's my whole point. They're not. You're telling me that, and I agree with what you're saying, but you have to be realistic about it. So if I'm 18 and I just got the right to vote, I don't even know what and that's not black or white or indifferent. It's like, I don't know what my best interest is. I'm 18, right? And then if you're, for myself, and I'm not saying it's right, but when I was, probably the first 2 times I voted because, the first time it's, go in there and vote for Democrats. So at the end of the day, Democrats might be in my best interest, but it's not true that that's why I voted for them in 1989 or 1990.
What I mean by best interest is, this country's about money.
Right, but what I'm saying, but you're still missing the point, because I didn't even base it on money. I didn't base it on anything.
You vote who's going to give you what you want. Whether you are Republican, Democrat, Liberal, you vote for people that are going to give you access to what it is you want. No matter how you want it. You vote for people who are going to give you what you want.
Okay. Kevin?
Well, I'll just say one thing to that, and I think Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell said it best, is it is a mistake to judge policy based on its intent versus its result. We get all these intents.
Good intentions have consequences, yes.
That is all we've gotten is intent. We're going to solve poverty. We're going to do this. 50 years
And
later,
not just Democrats,
what
war on
has
drugs,
been the result?
Yep.
Base it on results, not intent.
Mary?
That's it.
And that goes to John Adams.
To be solved. Poverty makes so much money
Invisible hand.
every year for capitalists.
We're debating an issue. Mary?
I just wanted to say that I think for the first time, the Tea Party has been the party that is saying, we want nothing, we want you to back off. So that's the first time. We're not looking for self-interest, we're just saying, back off, leave us alone. So, that's my message. Is like, who will most leave me alone?
Well, yeah, and nothing's wrong with that. What happened is
His mother only wanted government to leave her alone.
Perfect.
That's all.
That's what
Right.
I mean, I'm an economic professor, and the founder of economics, John Adams, said the exact same thing when he talked about the invisible hand.
Adam Smith.
I'm sorry, Adam Smith. Thank you, John. Yeah, Adam Smith. He talked about that invisible hand. That no matter how good your intent is, regardless of who you are, that thing called my personal self-interest is always going to come into play, and then I'm going to inevitably find a way to gravitate into taking more power for my own self-interest.
in the back.
Question, can you talk briefly about what the Democrats, in other words, how do we get from, blacks being almost all Republican to now obviously
To Democrat.
all Democrats? Can you be specific about how did the Democratic Party do it? What's up? No, all history.
Right.
What are some of the key things
Right.
they did? And do you think that the Republicans will be able to get black votes without doing similar things that the Democrats did?
Great. I'm going to answer the second one first. Yes, I think they can. I don't think it's going to flip where it's 95-5 the other way like it used to be, but I don't think that's necessary. But I think they can make enough inroads, because most of the people who are conservative are going to be conservative. So to have an effect, really you need, let's say, a 5% shift. So if you got 11 or 12% of the black vote, that changes everything right there. But I think they can probably get up to 25 or 30. Probably never going to get more than 30 ever again, but 30 is enough, right? That's a big change. But you talk about what happened. So they were voting, obviously, that's why I talked about in something I wrote. It wasn't in the book, but it was some bio, something that someone did. And I talk about how really blacks never really had a choice in voting, right? Like I talked earlier about white people can be liberal or conservative, but they have a choice to get that. Because when blacks first got the right to vote, they voted for Republicans because the guy who gave them the right to vote was a Republican, right? So even then it was R. They still weren't voting their best interest, right? Not as a whole, but eventually it started to move that way. But what happened was you started with FDR. So all the Republicans were getting majority of the vote. A couple of them, like McKinley, didn't do as much for blacks as some of the others, and they didn't like him as much, but they still voted for him, but they kind of challenged him. Then FDR, we had the Great Depression, which is kind of different. That's a whole different discussion about FDR and what he did and whether he was right or wrong. But of course, it was a vast depression, hadn't happened before. So, in situations like that, people come up with radical ideas. So we can debate whether it was right or wrong, but, he had the New Deal, and it was going to put people to work and all this kind of stuff, and some people begrudgingly voted for it, some people were against it. But when he did the second New Deal, a lot of Republicans and conservatives are like, that's just too far, right? It's too much government control. So even though it has a good intent, I'm not going to go on board with that. So some of the Democrats and some of the Democrats and many black people felt that those policies, whether they're right or wrong, best interests, they probably would have helped me. So the fact that you're voting against them, I don't know if I still want to vote for you. Because that was actually, if you go back and find it, there's books out there from blacks at that time where it was like an inner fight like it is now with how dare you be a Republican, what's wrong with you? It was like that for the people like, I'm thinking I might go vote for the Democrats, because it was like that, like, what are you, crazy, don't vote for the Democrats. But even then, so some of them started to shift in, but it still was 65, 35, something like that. Nixon got 35% of the vote the first time he ran. Even though I think his points made sense, this is a perfect example of your delivery. The big shift, I think, was, and people say it was the vote on the Civil Rights Act, but we all know Republicans voted for it more than Democrats did. It was Barry Goldwater.
We don't all know that.
I would say we all probably know that. I don't know, everybody doesn't know that, but we all know that. But I think it was Barry Goldwater when he wrote his Conscience of the Conservative, and he talked about states' rights, he talked about this, and he was the first guy. You talk about, see, that's how sometimes I agree with it, but sometimes when you go back to just strictly the Constitution and leave us alone kind of thing, how people may hear it differently, because perception matters. It's like, we don't need that Department of Education. If that state doesn't want to let blacks in their schools, then they have the right to do it. I'm not saying it's right, but they have a right to do it. Go to a different state, that kind of thing. It kind of rubbed people the wrong way, even though he wrote in 60, 61, and he ran in 4 years later. So when he ran, everybody, all the blacks ran from him at that point. It's like, we're not voting for that guy. And then when LBJ signed in the Civil Rights Act and the Voters' Rights Act, and he declared his war on poverty, it was over then. I don't think Republicans gotten more than 8 or 9% of the vote since then. I think George Bush, the second time, got more than anybody else since then. Yeah.
My question is specifically, do you believe that Republicans today are going to be able to capture any significant black votes, candidates,
right,
unless they specifically address what black people feel to be racial discrimination issues? For example, Christine Todd Whitman in Jersey got 25% of the black vote, but she spoke up publicly against racial profiling.
Right.
And she said that she couldn't find another elected Republican official who would publicly stand with her to condemn racial profiling. So my question is, do you believe that unless Republicans do those types of things,
right,
that we're really going to capture significant black votes?
I think I think they do need to address race directly, but they really need to craft how they're going to do it. I don't think it needs to be done in, we're Republicans and we were racist and we're wrong and we're going to stop, obviously. And it can't be, done in a way where they're saying that we're going to do this, we're going to give this. But yeah, they have to address it, and they have to be consistent about it, and it has to go on. And they have to quickly, I talk about in the book how when there's going to be crazies out there. So when the crazy from the right says something crazy, they need to quickly say it's crazy. It's not that complicated. They say, yeah, John was on TV the other day, what he said was stupid, and it's crazy, and we don't agree with it, now let's move on. And then stop talking about it. We all made an official statement, we moved on from it. Yes, Mark?
All right, I see Jim's getting ready for last
Nice
questions.
Okay, 2 more questions, he said.
So, The way I see it, it's more like Tea Party versus socialism, and I'm not thinking about race.
Right.
Anything else, actually, I don't care at all about it. I want to pay less taxes, and I'm amazed that white, black, young, old, gay, straight, why isn't everybody a Tea Party member who wants to pay less taxes, less government, more freedom? So I just wanted more views on this whole socialism expansion.
Right, but
of
is
government.
it Kathy?
Yeah.
Kathy made a good point. It's not blacks are more conservative than you think they are. I have most of my friends are successful, so most of them they hate everything about the Democrat Party from an economic standpoint. You know, they just I can't vote for the Republican because they either think they're all racist, or I can't vote for them because they don't care about poor people. You know, I'm not fair. I'm not poor. I'll feel bad if I don't care about poor people, so I want to vote for the guy. It's like the actors in Hollywood and the NFL players and all them. It's not like they're liberal. They're like, I made it on playing basketball or having a pretty face, and I'm making millions of dollars. I feel guilty that I don't have to work for my $20 million. So the least I can do is vote for the guy that says he's going to help the poor guy. That's all it is. It's not like they believe it. That's why. So that's why you have to. That's why I believe it's possible. You have to convince them that their benevolence is not working. Don't vote for them, even though because the only reason you're voting, you don't need the money. You're voting for them because you think they're doing a good thing. Let me show you that they're not doing a good thing. Last question. Oh, I went to you. You passed it off.
Have you ever considered running for public office?
Says the Chicago GOP, right? And Victor, yeah. Have I considered? I considered it before I said I wasn't going to do it. That was quick. I'll take one more. One more.
So it sounds to me like you're doing a really good job bringing your message to Republican organizations, Tea Party organizations, that sort of thing. How much attention have you been getting on the other side of the coin in the black community?
Obviously, conservatives love me, so it's easier. But I do a lot of like Black Book Club meetings. I actually have another one today in the suburbs. I did one in November. So, and then I end up, meeting people and going to other events. So I go to, obviously, it's fewer of them because you'd be amazed when I wrote the book and I said to my friend, hey, check this out. They didn't say, no, you're crazy, you're a Republican. They just didn't reply to it like it would never happen. But they replied to, but here's the funny thing, they replied to all the emails I sent before and every email after, including later that day when I say you want to go to dinner. They saw those emails, they just happened. Then I said something, I wait a few times since we meet and talk, and I say, hey, did you get my email? I didn't get that email. Right, so that's the difficulty is getting in front of them. I think, the way I deliver the message is not in a negative way. And if this were a Democratic room and they say, well, I think this works, and I just say, like I said before, tell me how it works, and I'll show them how it won't work. But, I get some, but not as many. Obviously, the conservative and the Tea Party groups are more likely to have me there. But I appreciate you all. Thanks for having me.